The lawyer told me my legal strategy was fundamentally flawed and showed I'd never read the precedent case. I was the judge who wrote that decision. Attorney David Garrison leaned back in his leather chair and tapped his pen against the case file with my name on it. Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate that you think you understand contract law, but the precedent in Whitfield versus Consolidated Industries is crystal clear. Your employment contract with Meridian Tech includes a non-compete clause that's fully enforceable under current case law. Trying to fight it would be a waste of your money and my time. He said this with the kind of patronizing confidence that comes from never being seriously challenged. I sat across from him in his downtown office, my hands folded on my lap, watching him misrepresent my own judicial decision with absolute certainty. The Whitfield case had been one of my last rulings before I retired from the bench 8 months ago. I'd spent 3 weeks writing that opinion, carefully parsing the boundaries of enforceable non-compete agreements in Virginia. Garrison had either never actually read the full decision or had fundamentally misunderstood its central holding. I'd come to him through a referral from my former colleague, Judge Helena Voss, who'd retired 2 years before me and said Garrison was competent and discreet. I needed discretion because Meridian Tech was suing me for breach of contract after I'd started consulting for a company they considered a competitor. The CEO was the son of a state senator, and the case was getting media attention I didn't want. I'd hoped to resolve this quietly without revealing my judicial background, which would have made the whole situation a circus. Garrison pulled out a highlighted copy of what appeared to be a summary of the Whitfield decision, not the actual 43-page opinion I'd written. See here, the court ruled that non-compete clauses are presumptively valid and enforceable when they're reasonable in scope and duration. Your contract specifies 2 years and restricts you from working in medical technology, which is exactly what you're doing with BioAdvanced Solutions. Whitfield says that's enforceable. We should negotiate a settlement where you agree to stop consulting and maybe Meridian drops the damages claim. I looked at the summary he was reading from and recognized it immediately. It was from a legal database that provided shortened versions of cases for quick reference, but it had left out the most critical part of my holding. The actual Whitfield decision had established a 3-part test for non-compete enforceability, and the third prong specifically addressed contracts signed under economic duress. In my opinion, I'd written that non-compete clauses agreed to as a condition of continued employment rather than initial hiring required heightened scrutiny because the employee lacked meaningful bargaining power. Meridian had made me sign their non-compete 6 months after I'd joined the company, threatening termination if I refused. Under my own precedent, that clause was almost certainly unenforceable. Garrison had missed this entirely. Have you read the full Whitfield opinion? I asked, keeping my tone neutral and curious rather than confrontational. Garrison waved his hand dismissively. I've read the summary and the key holdings. That's standard practice. We don't have time to read every page of every case. The database summaries capture the essential points. I felt my jaw tighten, but kept my expression neutral. The summary might be incomplete. The full opinion includes specific language about contracts signed post-employment under threat of termination. That's exactly my situation with Meridian. Garrison laughed, actually laughed, and shook his head. Mr. Reynolds, I've been practicing employment law for 15 years. I know how to read case law. What you're describing isn't in Whitfield. You're confusing it with a different case. Or maybe you read something on a blog that misrepresented the holding. This is why laypeople shouldn't try to do legal research. You end up chasing theories that don't exist. His condescension was remarkable. I'd presided over complex litigation for 22 years before retiring at 58 due to health concerns. I'd written over 300 published opinions, taught constitutional law as an adjunct professor, and served on the state bar's judicial ethics committee. And now I was being lectured by a mid-tier employment attorney who couldn't be bothered to read a complete judicial opinion. I pulled out my phone and opened the legal database app I still maintained, found the full Whitfield decision, and scrolled to page 31 where I'd written the critical analysis. If you look at page 31, paragraphs 3 and 4, the court specifically addresses post-employment non-competes. I turned my phone toward him. Garrison barely glanced at it. That's dicta, not holding. It doesn't create binding precedent. The central rule from Whitfield is that reasonable non-competes are enforceable, period. Everything else is just the judge musing about hypothetical situations. I'd written that section carefully and deliberately, specifically intending it to be part of the holding, not dicta. I'd even cited it in 2 subsequent opinions to establish that it was binding precedent. But Garrison was so confident in his misreading that he wouldn't even consider the possibility he was wrong. And that's when things took a turn I never expected. To see the full story, click the link below or go on my channel.